Emovis Ireland is the leading provider of mobility-based solutions, and they make the complicated easy because they believe in the freedom of going places. Today we're going to meet Graeme McQueen. Graeme is the Head of Communications at Dublin Chamber of Commerce. Graeme, thanks a million for joining us on Going Places today. We've lots to discuss, but to start, would you maybe just tell us a bit about Dublin Chamber, the role of Dublin Chamber, particularly when it comes to transport in Dublin?
Yeah, sure. So the Chamber has been going for about 235 years at this stage. So what we are is a representative group. We represent businesses in the city. So businesses would join us for a couple of reasons. Really, one of them is to come out and meet other businesses, to network we run about 130 networking events every year. The other thing we do as well, which is why companies join us, is to make Dublin a better place to live, a better place to do business. So core to that is having a really good public transport system. We speak to our members all the time. We speak to the businesses in the city. We find out what their problems are, the challenges that they're facing, and then we take it to government and decision makers in the city and try and improve the situation. So with transport, we find out where the pinch areas are. We find out what the plans are to solve it. We try and influence those plans and ultimately just try and make the place a better city to get around.
So from your research and talking to the businesses, what do you find are the improvements, the key improvements that need to be made in transport in Dublin?
The number one thing is the city just has to become an easier place to move around. So the problem that we have sitting here today is that we had a large, long period there for, think of between 2008 and basically 2014, where pretty much nothing was really being done in the city centre. Nothing was being done in the Dublin region as a whole, and we represent Dublin region. We're companies all over the region. So too little was done over that period of time. Not enough money was invested. The investment tap was basically turned off. So projects that we've been hearing about for decades, the likes of Metro North, which is now known as Metrolink, the likes of Dart Underground, these are projects that would revolutionise the city from a manoeuvrability point of view. But these projects were stalled. We've been very slow to get them going again. The good thing about the economic upturn is that we've managed to get some of these plans back on the agenda. So we're pretty close to getting projects like Metrolink over the line, getting them started. Bus Connects, the revision of the bus network in the city, they're moving closer as well. So what we're looking to see happen now in the Chamber is these plans move off the page and to come to fruition so that people can start moving around the city that little bit easier.
So is that a priority of Dublin Chamber, to see action?
Absolutely. So we're very good in this country at making plans. You take a project like Dart Underground, which would be an underground connector that would run basically from Connolly Station through to Houston Station. So it provide a missing link in our rail network effectively. That's a project we've been talking about since the 1970s. Like, we're sitting here in 2020. We already, at this stage, don't have a start date, a finish date. Nobody knows the final plan. So what we're looking to see happen as a chamber is for the government to really have a plan for the next 20, 30, 40 years. When one project finishes, we should be ready to go with another one. We should always be building something in the city. So you look at Lewis Cross City, which was finished a couple of years ago. Pretty much since that happened, nothing has been built in the city, and that's a shame. That's a missed opportunity. So as the city's getting busier, there's more people working in the city, coming to visit the city. It's just pressure on the existing system. And if we're going to get people out of cars, if we're going to get people onto public transport, we've got to make it more attractive. So unless we invest consistently and ambitiously over a long period of time, nothing's going to change, which is what the best cities in the world do, and we want to see that happen in Dublin.
I'm keen to know what the businesses think, who you liaise with, because we've heard a lot about consumers and people who travel in and out of the city every day. But the businesses that are in Dublin City, what's their view of transport and what are the issues that affect them?
I think the one word that comes to mind is frustration. I think there's frustration at the slow progress, the slow rollout of plans. So, you look at something like simple things, like we should have cycle networks right across Dublin. It'd be very easy to implement. We've seen great progress in the number of people cycling in the city. It's gone from about 4,000 maybe 5-6 years ago up now to around 12,000. But those numbers are stalling because it's still not safe enough to cycle in the city. So you look at Fitzwilliam Street in Dublin, there's a plan there to create a segregated cycle route. But it's taken years to progress it. You're talking a piece of infrastructure that would be about 1 kilometre in length. It would seem that's a pretty simple one. That's a pretty simple win for the city. But we just can't get it over the line. So when businesses see that, it frustrates them. It frustrates their staff because their staff are late for work. They're having to leave early so they can get home in time. Journey times are very inconsistent in the city, so we need to get to a point where we can deliver a really good public transport system, regular commute times, so that the person getting on the bus in the morning or on the train, they know how long it's going to take them, they know that they can get on it, they're not being left standing at the station as they are at the moment on a lot of rail services. So I think businesses want to see action. They see a lot of plans happening. They hear good, the national development plan's been announced. There's lots of good projects in there, the likes of Metrolink. The problem sometimes is people think we've been here before. So Metro North came along, it was ditched. It's now Metrolink. There's probably a lack of faith there that it's actually going to get delivered. So we need to make sure that that happens. So until people see delivery, they won't have that confidence. But we're sure we can get there with the right political will.
And your own strategy in Dublin Chamber, 2050. Talk to me about that.
So Dublin 2050 was a project we kicked off just after the recession, really. 2016 we kicked it off, and what we noticed, what we heard back from businesses, was that there was a lack of long-term vision for the city. So nobody really knew where we were going in 20, 30, 40 years' time. And that's being realistic. That's how the best cities are planned. We did a study mission in 2016 to Copenhagen. We went over there for 2-3 days. We met as many influential people as we could, and we asked them, how did you get things done? Because from a transport point of view, from a cycling, public transport point of view, it's streets ahead of where Dublin is. So what could we learn? So we listened to them, and they told us, gave us some advice that we could bring back. So we then did, in 2017, we did a survey of about 20,000 Dubliners. It's called the Great Dublin Survey. And we asked them a load of questions about how to improve quality of life in the city. What would you like to see happen in your Dublin by 2050? Because everybody, you're a Dub yourself, you have a sense of belonging to the city. This is your city, you want to see it develop and grow. So we asked them questions like, how would you like to move around? What are your expectations for what Dublin will be like in 2050? The answers we got back were fascinating. I think transport was core to everything that came back. It's central to quality of life in the city. And until we get to grips with that, until we start delivering on the big projects, until we start improving the cycle network, making it easier to walk around, people are going to be frustrated by Dublin. So if you want to keep the best staff, workers in the country, we need to make sure that quality of life in the city is high. We want to make sure that our kids, our grandkids want to stay in Dublin, that it's a city that's a magnet for the best talent, the best companies, that attracts tourists. We want it to be the best city. So that's very much our goal in Dublin Chamber.
What was interesting in the survey also, over half of the people that you did survey expected and wanted to see public transport running on renewable energy by 2050. Do you think that's realistic?
I think it is realistic, and I think it's essential. I think we've got to get to grips with sustainability. What we saw in the chamber, really through the recession years, was that sustainability slipped as an agenda item for companies because, understandably, they were basically trying to survive. They were trying to keep the business going. But as the recoveries kicked in, sort of from 2014, 2015 onwards, we've seen companies come back to looking at sustainability as something that they just can't avoid. And I think people are looking for that now in their transport, in the city's transport network, absolutely. More people are looking to cycle, they're looking to take public transport. Not only that, but they want the public transport to be, we see the hybrid buses coming out now in Dublin. That's a really progressive step. Things like the rail network as well. There's a plan there to electrify more of the rail network around Dublin. That's really welcome, but people want to see it happen. Again, talking about it, we have the plans there, but we need to activate them. We need to put the money behind them, and let's get them going. And key to that is being ambitious about the delivery targets as well. So, something like Bus Connects, for example, which would revitalise the bus network in Dublin and make it much more effective. We talk about an end date for that of 2027. I mean, surely we can be delivering these things a lot quicker. If not the whole network, then let's get as much of it done as possible. On the cycling front, we've a plan there for a cycle network within the M50, basically segregated cycle lanes all over the city. That was produced in 2013. But as we sit here today, progress has been so slow. There's plans there for the Liffey cycle route along the quays. People see these projects, but they're 4 or 5 years away, but they should be relatively simple wins. So I think there's a frustration there that these projects aren't being delivered quicker. But sustainability, people absolutely want to see it, and I think people will be making a lot more choices going forward. Transport, just general living based on how sustainable the company that's producing it or how sustainable the mode of transport is.
What do you think are the main obstacles to improving the transport system and to see that progression that everyone wants?
I think think the big obstacle now is having conviction. Like, I think we want to see the political will to start getting things done. So there's that saying out there, that perfect is the enemy of good. And I think we need to take that on board in Dublin. Things like Metro North, for example, we had that plan there for the underground network between the airport and the city centre. That became Metrolink. People now say it's going to the wrong place. It should be going here, it should be going there. Ultimately, what we want to see in the Chamber is an underground rail network. You think in 50 years' time, what's the transport system going to look like? We would see an underground network, throughout Dublin to all the major sort of population hubs. And so I think people want to see things like that starting to get done. So once you build Metrolink, that line between the airport and the city centre, that's something we should be building with a view to adding to that in the years to come. Then we want to see the likes of Dart Underground starting. There's no reason why we can't have that project shovel ready by 2025. That's only 5 years away. So that by the time you finish one project, we move on to the next one. That's how the city's going to develop, and I think we need to take that long-term vision approach. We have the Dublin 2050 project. The reason for that is we're trying to encourage people to think further down the line. So where do we want it to be by, 2100? Where's the transport system going to be? And I think we need to have that vision to focus on, that shining light. Where are we trying to get to? And ultimately, that's going to benefit this generation, but also the generations to come.
Is there resistance or conflicts amongst the various different stakeholders in the transport industry? Dublin Chamber might like the idea of one thing, and another organisation might have their own vested interest or their own ideas. And so to get everyone on the same page is difficult.
I mean, I think within the business community and within the business organisations, there's a general consensus there about what they would like to see. And fundamentally, we don't really mind as a chamber how people move around. We want to be sure that the city is easy to move around, that the journey times are one, quick, but two, consistent. Because at the moment, I get on the bus in the morning, I know it's going to take me somewhere between 30 minutes on a good day, it could be 70 minutes on a bad day. So when you have that inconsistency in the system, the bus just doesn't come across as that compelling an option. And bear in mind that we're trying to get people to walk past their nice, comfy, warm car with their, their own music in it. Trying to get them to walk past that in the morning, to go to the cold, wet, misty bus stop. So if you're going to do that, the offer at the end has got to be compelling. You've got to know that the bus is going to be there. You've got to know how long it's going to take. You want it to be comfortable, it's got to be affordable, that kind of thing. So until we deliver that, people are going to stay in the car. That's the bottom line. So if you're going to entice them out, the offer has got to be compelling, basically.
You mentioned Copenhagen earlier, and they do a lot of things really well. What is it that they do well that we'd look to and go, God, wouldn't it be great if we had that in Dublin?
Probably the biggest thing Copenhagen did was put in place a long-term plan. They had a 5-finger plan for the city, which was effectively all the arterial routes into the city, and they decided that they were going to put in really good transport within that. And then within the core city centre, again, they've got an underground network, and they've got fantastic world-class cycling infrastructure above the ground. And slowly they've been able to eliminate the private car. They've been able to do that because people have got that really good public transport option. They're able to cycle. I think at the moment it's about 41% of people, 41% of journeys to work and school in the morning are done by bike in Copenhagen. You come to Dublin, we're around 6%. So we're way, way behind. They're not stopping there. They've got an ambition to grow that to 50%. So, in the short term in Dublin, we'd have an ambition to grow, cycling numbers, the number of journeys to around 10%, but we think we can get up to 20, 25% within the next sort of 15 years. But doing that means putting in proper segregated cycle lanes, the way they have them in Copenhagen. Again, it's best in class. You go along the road and the cycle lanes are protected by parked cars. So in terms of safety, that's why you've got kids, you've got old people, young people, families cycling along all around the city. People don't own cars. They probably own 3 bikes, though. They have one at a metro station, they have one at home, and they have one at work. It's ingrained in their culture, but it's because it's safe. I think of my own kids now. My oldest lad is 8. He lives about a kilometre from his school. We live in a cul-de-sac, so it's a relatively secure, safe environment, or it should be. But would I let him cycle to school? Like, no chance, because it's just not safe enough. He'd be dodging in and out the parked cars. He'd be fighting for space with buses and cars and vans and things like that. So, until we address issues like that, until we get our kids comfortable with cycling, we're kind of fighting a losing battle. But the plans are there to make it happen. We need to get them off the page and put the money behind them to make them happen.
May I ask you then, if you have your own children, does that inform or encourage your own work and maybe fuel your fire to want to see things change because you have your own kids and you want to improve the quality of their life and also their safety?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think one of the questions we asked in the Dublin 2050 Great Dublin Survey that we ran a couple of years ago was we asked people, how much do we need to plan for future generations? And I think there was a general acceptance and a will from people that we do plan for future generations. It's not just about us. I think we accept that some things take time. If you think about rolling out an underground rail network in the city, that's going to take decades. That's just, we can't get around that. So if you accept that you're not planning for me and you, we're planning for my kids and your kids and their grandkids as well. That's the way London did it. I mean, their underground network was built over 100 years ago. So, they took a decision that they were going to go for that, and they've been able to add to it over time. And, you look back with hindsight, 100, 150 years, you can see the progression, and, that's the approach we need to take to Dublin. I see what the city's like from my own kids' point of view. So you bring them in to do Christmas shopping or something like that. It's quite an uncomfortable environment for families in the city centre. You'd be pretty scared to let go of your kid's hand walking down O'Connell Street or even Henry Street, somewhere like that. If you take them up Dame Street, a central, really core city in the city centre, would you let go of your kid's hand? You wouldn't, because there's buses going by, there's cars, there's cyclists on the pavements because they're forced out there because they don't have the proper cycling infrastructure. The city centre can be quite intimidating. If you look at the best cities for quality of life, the likes of Amsterdam, Copenhagen, Barcelona, things like that, they've got that family-friendly feel to them. They've been able to grasp the fact that if you can make it safe for kids, safe for families, it just becomes a better place to live. And I think there's, you see the start of some of these ideas coming into Dublin, the likes of College Green Plaza, pedestrianisation of Liffey Street. There's little pockets, there's little ideas happening. What we'd like to see is how they're all going to come together to make that better city. So if you look out to 2040, 2050, where do we want to be? What do we want it to look like? It's actually very interesting to listen to the kids as well, to ask them, what do you think makes a great city? Like, kids love the bus, kids love the train, kids love cycling. But somewhere, if you look at our own generation, that's been knocked out of us and we've all jumped in the car. So I think if you can make kids feel safe cycling around the city, for example, or walking to school, walking to family and friends or whatever it might be, if you can get that into kids at a young age, I think that leaves us in really good stead for the future.
Well, let's look to the future. We won't look too far ahead, but maybe even if we were to go 5 years down the road, which to some people is a long time away, but in terms of the development within the transport industry, we know it's not too far away. So what changes, if any, do you think will be in place in the next 5 years?
It's a good question. I think there's probably a lot of quick wins we could make in the city. I think one of them is cycling. So you take some of the city centre streets, take the Quays for example. We've a plan there to put in segregated cycle lanes. That should be something that we're able to turn around pretty quickly. Then you look at the likes of Dame Street, you look at Nassau Street. At the moment, these streets are sort of 3 lanes wide for cars. You've got a sliver of pavement, you've no segregated cycle lanes. We could change that pretty quickly and you could make it a much safer environment. Then on the bus network side, I think you'd like to see a couple of things. I think you'd like to see more dedicated bus space, so we want it so that the buses have an uninterrupted route in and out of the city. You want to see buses, I think it's really good to see the progression away from sort of diesel buses to, at the moment we're moving to hybrid. Hopefully in time we'll become fully electric and have a really sustainable bus service in the city. And then as well, projects like the DART expansion scheme, so pushing the electrification of the DART line out to Balbriggan and Maynooth, we'd like to see them happen. These can all happen within 5 years, but it's going to take the political will. We're going to have to put the money behind it. We're probably going to have to see the parties maybe coming together and agreeing what the core projects are for Dublin. The thing we want to get away from is that when a government changes, plans fall off. Things get slowed down. So we've seen that with the metro plan from the airport to the city centre. We've got Metrolink there now. by all accounts, we're going to start that 2021 is the start date for it. We've got to make sure that that happens. Bus Connects, again, we want to refine that plan. We want to get everyone broadly happy with it, but let's get cracking with it. Let's get it built, and let's deliver it within the next 5 years. If we do that, it's going to be a much more pleasant city to live in and to move around in. That's a simple fact.
Okay, let's have a bit of fun. You get to choose one aspect of the transport industry, one challenge, one obstacle, one area of it that right now, like that, you could just solve. If only you could, what would it be?
We've got an open checkbook here.
Money is no object. We can get it done right away.
It's dangerous.
Whatever you like.
You give a Scotsman a checkbook, he doesn't spend any money anyway. But
you got to spend it.
I think what we'd like to see, I think we've got to get underground in the city. That's the bottom line. So let's get cracking with the Metrolink project. I think we need to get realistic. We've seen huge progress with cycling in the city. We saw that stall a little bit over the last 12 to 18 months. Until we put safer cycle lanes into the city, that progress isn't going to be where it needs to be. We could probably get to 20-25% of journeys within the M50 being made by bike pretty quickly. So let's get on with that one. And then the bus network as well. Bus Connect's plan is there. We've gone through a couple of public consultations at this stage. We can get that one over the line. We can start building it. And once you put them in place, you'll get more people cycling. You're going to increase capacity on the rail network as well. It's bursting at the seams at the moment. I think in my own situation, the train station right next to me, Ashtown train station, if I go to get the 8:25 train on a Monday morning, the reality is I can't get on that train because it's full by the time it reaches me. And that's in an area that's growing really fast. We're putting in about enough units for 5,000 people there at the moment. It's one of these strategic development zones in the city. So, we're hitting pinch points all the time. So I think if we can just get cracking on the projects like Metrolink, Bus Connect, cycle lanes, things like that, I think it would make a really big impact on people's lives, and it would just make Dublin, a much better place to live.
Okay, I said one, that's three. But we'll grant you those wishes, and that would make a huge change. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think the bottom line is we can mess around with plans, we can change plans, we can keep going to public consultation, we can change government, we can go back to the drawing board. But the fundamentals of what we're trying to achieve are the same. We're never probably going to get the perfect solution to the problem. So you think of an underground rail link, people will say we should take it here rather than there. Let's start building it. We can always build it out after. And I think that's what we want to see. We want to see politicians, and decision makers in the city look at the greater good. Stop looking at it in political 5-year cycles, and let's think 20, 30 years down the line. Where do we want to be? What do we want the city to be for my kids, my grandkids, your own grandkids, that kind of thing? Until we get that vision in, we're going to be making short-term decisions all the time. Progress is going to be slow, and Dublin's not going to be where it needs to be.
And I guess in that sense, it's about leaving a legacy as well, and leaving it better than we found it.
Yeah, look, all the plans we're talking about today, the likes of Metrolink, the likes of Bus Connects, the likes of Dart Underground, an underground network right across the city, eventually we're going to build these. So let's start planning for it, and let's start making the commitment. Let's put the shovels in the ground, let's put the money behind it, let's make it happen. Because when we look back in 200 years' time, we'll be long gone by that stage unless there's some miraculous scientific discoveries.
Graeme, thanks so much for joining us today.
Sure.
Ongoing Places. Pleasure to meet you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Cheers.